Hello, everyone, and welcome to Of Mushrooms and Men, a Last of Us podcast. I am one of your hosts, the host of the Culture Cast, Chris Dashew, and I'm joined by my good friend, and he is the co-host of this show. He is a clicker at heart. He loves to click in the night. You might hear him clicking around your neighborhood. Your friend and mine, Yashar.
And you are the Riley to my Ellie.
No. How dare an African-American character die to have a white character be the savior of this show? Hey, does anybody know that this is based off of a video game and like that's what happens in the game? I saw a Slash Films review and they were like, how dare an African-American character dies and the white character can be the savior? And it's like, how dare you not literally realize what this is based off of, because like they were gonna do this way. They were never there. One of the things they were never going to change was this, because there was no reason for them to change it.
Not to mention, like, pretty much everyone dies except for, like, I mean, not like, again, like, spoilers, but I'm generally, like, in the context of the show, besides Joel and Ellie.
It's a post-apocalyptic show, for fuck's sake. Like, I don't know what you guys expected. On this episode of Mushrooms and Men, we're going to be talking about the 7th episode of HBO's latest adaptation of something that they didn't own ahead of time, The Last of Us. So this episode is titled Left Behind. It is directed by Lisa Johnson and written once again by Neil Druckmann, and it stars Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal as Jelly and Ellie. Joel and Ellie. It stars them as Ellie and Joel once again, except this time it's a flashback episode featuring and focusing all on what Ellie was up to before she met Joel, Marlene, and Tess. And what was she up to? Well, she was in a Fedra boarding school, and she met a girl, fell in love with the girl, and then they went and snuck off to a mall together. And that's the setup of this episode, folks. It is focusing on the DLC titled Left Behind from the Last of Us video game that this show is an adaptation of. So all of that out of the way, Yashar, what did you think of this? I think we would both agree inevitable episode. This was the episode we knew was going to happen, I think.
Yeah, well, I wasn't 100% sure if they were going to do the DLC, but they mentioned Riley a couple times earlier in the season, and it did, like you said, it seemed inevitable. And then once we saw the episode title, it's named the same thing as the DLC. We get basically all the backstory that you ever get in the game for Ellie is here, about like who she is, why she is the way she is, where she came from. I think Liza Johnson directed this episode. I don't know if she directed any other episodes in this season. I don't think she did. But she also directed an episode of The Sex Lives of College Girls, which is a show I also really enjoy. And could also be the title of this episode.
Or What We Do in the Shadows, another show that she's directed episodes on.
She did that?
I know if Matthew Berry was in this show, it would be, I think, a lot different of a show. My God, look at those fungi men chasing after us. What are they doing?
But yeah, you get to see like where Ellie comes from, a little bit more on the Fedra part. And I think we've talked about how it's interesting how we see like the different areas of Fedra and how they integrate with people's lives. And I think we get a really good scene with, was it Terry Chen early on? That kind of, it's like maybe closer to, even probably a little better than Joel's experience, but definitely like very far removed from the Casey Fedra. And you kind of see how they establish like a sort of meaningful society in a way where you have the Fireflies being portrayed as more anarchists. And I think even Ellie kind of pushes Riley on that point. And you kind of see like, it's definitely not black and white, like what's good, what's bad. And I like that the show gives us more of that. And you see that like, there's not necessarily a great answer to the question of what's the best way to have a functioning society in a world that a lot of the things have been like broken. Like an interesting thing, actually, the Fedra guy mentioned when he was talking about the ways that you can die, and we can get that scene more. If you notice, he didn't even mention getting killed by clickers, like because they've gotten to the point where they can actually manage that. So it's the other things you have to worry about. So I thought that was an interesting caveat. And then obviously all the interactions with Riley and Ellie was heartening. It was sad, but it was like also nice. Like you got a sense of wonder that you don't get a lot in this show. I don't know. What do you think of the episode?
You know, I think it was similarly to last episode. It was kind of a slowdown in pace. Again, I think the show has kind of been clearly kind of ramping itself up and kind of establishing that the narrative is going towards this inevitable conclusion and this kind of direction of we're going to have an interaction with the Fireflies at some point. But I think it was smart to kind of slow the pace of the show down a little bit, give us as much, I mean, like you said, as much backstory as we need for Ellie, because again, like realistically, and this is kind of an issue with this show that I think a lot of people, I'm surprised haven't had, is, like, what are the motivations? Why? Give us more flashbacks. Give us more of what the characters were doing before the pandemic of the fungi or whatever you want to call it, the virus taking over. Before
the
that,
Panny D.
Yeah, the Panny D.
The Panettone.
Wow. Yeah, they probably got infected from eating that bread. You never know. It's interesting that this is as much as we'll ever get. And I think it's smart that this is as much as we'll ever probably get, unless the show wants to give more. Because again, like these characters are so smartly written that I don't question what they were doing before, because it less is about why they are the way they are now and more just an experience for us to understand who they are.
Basically, you're saying you appreciate the episode, but even if you didn't have it, you were fine on the characterization of Ellie. You didn't need it to buy into where we're at with the characters.
Right. I mean, and I think that is a success of the show in the way that it has written the characters, that this episode, I did not need this episode. That is why it is DLC in the game. It is downloadable content. It is additional content that you can play to further increase your enjoyment of the game or help recontextualize things or give you a better look at things that they're talking about. Again, in the game, Riley is not mentioned as much as she's been mentioned in the show, but she can be mentioned in the show because they know they're going to tell this story, and they know that people who are watching the show have played the game, have played the DLC. So they know if they say Riley, people who are in the know will know, and people who aren't will have it in this episode explained for them and kind of shown to them what they keep mentioning and why Ellie is the way she is from the start. Clearly, she has been this way even when we meet her. She's not abrasive. She's abrasive then. She's stuck in her ways then when we meet her at the beginning of this episode, the earliest we've ever seen her in the context of the show. So it's not that she's a different character and this is a transformative moment. It gives you, the audience, kind of a look at her moment that we saw with Joel at the beginning of the show. That's all this is. It's just us seeing that initial moment of trauma that she has that is, I guess, a transformative moment. But again, Ellie is very much going to be transformed more by what happens in this show, in the timeline of the show versus the flashback stuff. So yeah, I don't think it was needed, but I appreciate it. But we knew they were going to do it. But the show has been doing such a good job of writing the characters that if they had never done this, I don't think anybody would have said, "Oh man, what a shame." Like, maybe some people would be disappointed, but I think that the love story that the show has already done may have overshadowed how good this episode also could have been.
Oh, you mean the Bill and Frank?
Right.
Yeah. And I think that the love story component of it is important, but I don't think that's the crux, is to be like, oh, Ellie is heartbroken. I think the friendship supersedes the love. That was more of Ellie has discovered and accepted this thing about herself that I think will play more down the road in the story, rather than, oh, this is all about her losing her first love. No, it's about her losing the only connection she ever had. Like, we learned Riley had a family, so Riley knows what loss is. Ellie doesn't. Death is sort of this weird, almost not real thing to her, because it's constantly surrounding her in the context of growing up in the QZ. But I think she was too young to remember losing her parents. So she never had to have the connection and then the loss. The only thing she had was Riley. She obviously didn't have that many friends. She's a bit standoffish and stubborn, but clearly smart. And so this is the one connection she loses by the end of the episode. And maybe it recontextualizes why, even though she took a while to warm up to Joel, she's kind of attached to him, because this is a safety she hasn't had since Riley, or maybe ever. And so it makes it more important for her to maintain that. But also it allows her to stay divorced, I think, from a lot of the trauma and horrible things that are occurring around her, for better or worse. Like when she laughs at the dead body.
Right. Well, and I think that's the other thing about, this episode is, by the time we see Ellie in the show, it's not made clear how much time has passed. I guess it would be a couple weeks, 3 weeks, right? Is what they say.
Since she's been bitten.
Right.
It's been like, weeks to, it could be more than a couple months.
Right.
From the end of this episode to the beginning of the first episode.
Right. So, this character, again, like, is pretty much the character that we see when we meet her. So, it's, I don't know. It's interesting. I really appreciated the performances in the episode. I think Storm Reed is fantastic. Not a thankless role, but, that this character isn't around past this episode. So they have to do more to give their audience an idea of like why this is important, because we know this character is not going to survive. Like there is nothing that could be changed about that because we are already further in the narrative at this point. So I think she's really charming. I think she plays really well off of Bella Ramsey. I think this is also a really interesting episode for Bella Ramsey because she does a really good job in carrying the episode almost on her own. And I would say at the beginning of this show, I was concerned if this episode would work because I think you and I both coming into the show were a little hesitant on Bella Ramsey. We know Pedro Pascal can knock it out of the park. He always does. I mean, in this episode, he's lying on his back the entire episode. And even then, he's fantastic.
I think he was probably, filming an episode of The Mandalorian this week. Air quotes.
He got like $600,000 for this episode. Man was lying on his back for 2 scenes and he got paid $600K.
His agent is unbelievable.
His agent is getting paid like probably at least $6K an episode that he does because his agent's probably taking like 10%. At least.
I think he'd be.
Can you imagine?
60K?
Can you imagine 60, that? Oh, right. Sorry. 60K. You're right. Sorry. My math is terrible. It's even worse. Can you imagine getting $60K an episode as this dude's agent for him to just be like, I'm on my back the whole episode? Like, all right, bro, that's fucking great.
Like, he's got to, like, I know he's not the highest paid actor, like, per episode, but if you think about, like, per minute of work, he's got to be up there.
Isn't he, like, the highest paid actor on TV right now?
I mean, he might be. But my point is, like, the actual effort, like, $600K for, like, 2 minutes of screen time is,
pretty dope, dude. You wouldn't pass that gig up any more than I would.
No. I would even wear a helmet and cover my face the whole time.
Right. But Bella Ramsey was kind of the question going into the show. Not that I had any issue with her casting. Look, it's not like I love The Last of Us going into this show. I hadn't even finished the game, so I didn't have a emotional connection with either character to the point where I was angry that a certain person wasn't being cast. Look, Ellen Page was the inspiration for the character. Not according
to the creators, but
sure, right. But Elliot Page would not be playing the Ellie character, obviously.
Plus, even if you took the whole transition out of it, too old at this point.
Right. And that's my point. Like, even all of that aside, even if it was based off of them before they transitioned, they're like in their 30s now. So not gonna work. But when you have the character being played by Bella Ramsey, who, again, Bella Ramsey is 19, but looks the age. I think that was smart to cast someone who looks younger, but is older versus casting someone who was younger. Because I just think that
you mean older?
Well, no, I'm talking about like if you cast someone who's 14 to actually play a 14-year-old. I just don't know if they could rise to the occasion the way Bella Ramsey has. And I'm not saying all child actors are bad, but they say don't work with animals and kids for a reason. And pre-18, you're still a kid as far as I'm concerned, even if you're a teenager.
And they're probably taking like a longer term view on this. Like in the second game, we know there's like a several year gap, 4 or 5 years. So like Ellie is an adult in the second game. So if they're thinking of, hey, we want some sort of continuity, I mean, I guess you could recast, but it seems like they would rather keep the same people. Then you cast someone a little older that can play younger. And then in the next one, I assume she'll be essentially her real age.
Well, and in the video game between the first and the second one, it's a couple years, right? Like 3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years, yeah, which would actually take her to like 18, 19. I mean, like she's in like an adult relationship and stuff like that. Like she's an adult, like she's self-sufficient. And I mean, I want to get to the second game, but like she is like an adult. Like,
right. But I mean, look, that's not surprising, I think, for anyone, even if you don't know where the second game goes. But I think more to my point, this episode, I think finally I'm comfortable saying like Bella Ramsey is a fantastic actress. And that scene where she watches the lights turn on in the mall, I mean, her ability to kind of be convincing in her reaction to that, I think is just really impressive. I think she's a fantastic actress. And look, I don't think her time on Game of Thrones or The Worst Witch on Netflix is indicative of her acting ability. I think this is. And I think the second season of this show is going to be the Bella Ramsey hour. And I think we both know that. Maybe not the second season, but definitely the third season of this show.
Yeah.
If you and I mean, we've never even talked about that at length, but I think we both like kind of EVP, ESPing one another. Like we're able to connect and know kind of where it's going. Cause again, like the story in the second game is a lot different. It's a lot less straightforward. There's a lot more not moving parts, but the timeline is a little less straightforward, as this one is more or less chronological.
Yeah.
So, that was kind of my big concern going into this episode is Bella Ramsey going to be able to carry an episode on her own? And I think she does. And I think this is actually a better episode for them just going, let's just do it. Let's do the episode where she has to do everything.
There's these little moments when she's in the mall. Obviously, it's all quite new to her. But like the thing where they go to Victoria's Secret, or was it Victoria's Secret or Victoria's Secret? Like, and she like looks at the lingerie, and you can kind of see like she has a glance where she looks in the mirror. I interpreted that as she kind of wants to look good for Riley, so she was like, felt a little uncomfortable because she's like, oh, I don't look like this woman, this like, more traditional heteronormative, like ideal of beauty. Obviously, as we learned, Ellie, not particularly surprisingly, is a lesbian. So she hasn't, I think, maybe fully come to terms with that, at least with Riley. And then she's also like feeling a bit uncomfortable in her skin. And just these little micro moments, I think, show the depth of the character and like a really like masterful show of acting. And they both leads played really well off one another. And I would have liked to see a bit more time with them, but that's not really what this show's about. It's about like love and loss and like the things that love makes you do, good and bad. And I think this is just emphasizing that, like, Joel has lost someone that he loves, his daughter, right? And Tess now, and Ellie has lost someone that she loves, and how do people that are broken find that and come back together? I think that resonated with me. And then you also get the underlying tension between the Fireflies and Fedra, I think, that we mentioned earlier. If you want to actually get into that, did you like that scene about the Fedra agent?
I think it was interesting. I mean, I think it's maybe a little heavy-handed, but again, but I think for the sake of the audience, it's best to be a little heavy-handed here, because for people that aren't game players, they really need to make it clear as to what's going on and kind of beat you over the head with it. Because if you're a video game player and if you've played The Last of Us, it's not going to come as a surprise how you as the gamer should feel about Fedra and how you should feel conflicted in the scene. But they need to show you as an audience member that Ellie is conflicted, and by her being conflicted, you as the audience should be conflicted as well, as opposed to a video gamer just knowing, Fedra is pretty bad, but that's informed by a lot of things that you see while playing the game. I mean, we've seen Fedra in the show, but the Fedra that we've seen, the Boston Fedra, seemed like the best Fedra, relative to Kansas City, and but Kansas City is really the only other one we've really seen. So,
but even the Terry he's been in a lot of other stuff like House of Cards and things like that. I liked his performance because he even says, I know if we're not here, people are either going to starve or like kill each other. And we have seen what happens, when Fedra's not there. And you could say maybe he's rationalizing things, and, is he just like almost trying to put like propaganda on Ellie maybe a bit? But I think he does believe that, and like somewhere deep down, this is a guy that probably generally is trying to do the right thing, or what he thinks is the right thing. And it's like a trade-off I think you have to make in a society like this. And I'm happy like we're not in a place where we have to think like, which one would you rather have? But we see the Fireflies are a bit wild, and Riley's like, oh, I would never bomb, near you. But the fact that she has to say like she has to, it means like the Fireflies probably would. And like, is that cost enough to not deal with Fedra? We've seen the Firefly people working together, and it seems like that works. We haven't really seen them like running entire cities, or like people that aren't in the cause. Like, what does that look like?
Well, and they talk more about that in the game, right? And that's the incompetency of the Fireflies ends up kind of playing more into where this show, or I guess where the game ends up going. The show, the direction the show is going seems a lot more focused on love and the choices we make because of love. And I'm not saying that the game isn't that, but the game has a different component to it that is also kind of you understanding that the world around you is kind of fucked. Like, and everything is kind of fucked. And even the people that are trying to do good, like maybe necessarily can't. And like that's not particularly clear in the show. And I'm not sure that it needs to be. Maybe they'll wheel that out in the next 2 episodes. Cause again, I mean, we're going to see more of that, but best I can tell from the preview for the next episode, it's going to be some sort of Troy Baker led,
David
is some sort of cannibals or some shit, I'm sure, but Troy Baker is there. That's all I know. Yeah. And they keep showing him over and over again. All I can think is I didn't know
David.
I know he's playing some like a lackey of him, but they kept showing him over and over again. I was like, hey, that's the guy who plays Joel over and over again. It's like most people would not know who that is who are watching the show. I feel like
they may recognize his voice, but yeah, you wouldn't necessarily know what it looks like.
I'm not even sure he's not even doing the Joel voice. Like, I mean, it is kind of his voice, but
yeah.
What is he like? San Antonioized, I think is there. Yeah, something like that.
He's Southern for sure.
Yeah.
No, it's like I like that the show hasn't really taken a clear stance, like a moral stance on Fedra Fireflies. It's more of just like, here's information about both. Neither of them is probably totally right. Neither of them is probably totally wrong. There's definitely things that are wrong. And I think Ellie kind of brings some of that to light with Riley, and Riley does to Ellie. And it's just one of those things that I don't need an answer on, but it's nice to just keep alive in the back of our heads to understand, like, this is more, it's not like Walking Dead where it's just like people and zombies. Like there is some societal functioning going on, and like there's some tension about what that should look like.
Well, and I wonder, again, because the way the narrative is being presented, we do see kind of, like you said, not a stance being taken on Fedra or the Fireflies. I do wonder if in the next 2 episodes we'll see that. I mean, the next episode, probably not, but the last episode, I feel like they've got to get into it somehow, given where they're going with the gotta take Ellie somewhere storyline.
Yeah, but I don't. I mean, even in the game at the finale, like I don't really think I had a strong feel on like how it felt about like with the Fireflies, and I don't know, and like generally the mission that the Fireflies, at least that the game's portraying, just around using Ellie for a cure, right? That's like the whole premise, is getting her for a cure. Like who wouldn't support that? So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if their populism, sticks. But
I do like that we get to finally see a Fedra agent interact with someone in a less aggressive and abrasive way. Because up until this point, it's just been, the one Fedra agent that Joel was kind of selling drugs to, but also then killed. Just beat to death with his bare fucking hands. You can't convince me he didn't kill that guy. Like,
yeah, my guess is that dude's probably not alive.
As Joel Carey, he's never going back to Boston.
And then obviously we've heard about the Fedra people in Kansas City. They sounded like a not great bunch,
right?
But yeah, so it's interesting, and I think I also wanted on the Riley piece. Like it was a bit unclear, like did Fedra have anything to do with her parents' death, or like they're maybe unrelated, but because she's lost that, like she doesn't, I don't know, Fedra makes her feel uncomfortable. Like what pushed her towards the Fireflies? And it could have just been like an ideological, like Fedra keeps us safe, but I don't like the parameters of like we can't go out at night, and like we have to listen to them, and they hang people who they've said have committed crimes. Just kind of barbarous, but I don't know.
Well, they keep calling them fascists, but like.
Yeah,
we don't see a lot of the fascism that they talk about. We haven't seen it yet. Like all we've seen, best I can tell, what we've seen is like them trying to keep the people in the QZ safe.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to pretty much everyone in the Kansas City one's saying like they were literally like raping and killing and murdering, and so I believe that. But yeah, we haven't seen it, but it does seem like they assign you your work, because Riley says she gets assigned to guard duty, but she's actually in Fedra, but guard duty for like the stalls and basically like shit holes. But it also seems like Fedra is probably if you're going to get any job in the QZ, probably still the best job to have. And like, were all of these recruits all orphans, or were some of them volunteered? Some of them wanted to do it. I don't really need those answers, but it's interesting world building.
Well, and it's interesting that there's like a school where they're running around with electricity. Like it was weird and interesting to see that, because again, like in a lot of ways, that is atypical of and again, I mentioned it on the last show, mentioned it here. You've already mentioned The Walking Dead, a zombie show, unquote. Like, you just don't see that. And I like that there are these slower moments. Look, I mean, the entire setup of this episode only goes in one direction. One and or both of them have to get bit. In this scenario, because Ellie is immune, she has to get bit. But in another narrative, it would have been the two of them together, and then Riley gets bit and Ellie doesn't, right? I mean, it's that would have been the way that this had been told, because that's essentially
Riley sacrifices herself or something like
right. Because again, they kind of told that with Joel's character, right? She doesn't get infected, but she dies anyways. One of them survives. It's just Ellie has to be bitten, because the entire premise of the show, the game, is, she's immune. But this is where we find out that she's immune. That setup is so boilerplate. I'm glad that they landed it by having those quieter moments of them playing Mortal Kombat 2, which I know is a change from the video game.
What are they playing the video game?
The Turning, I think.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat 2 is better. Like, people know that one better. I don't know what the Turning is.
Well, and they have the Mortal Kombat 2 poster in her room, which I think was a kind of an interesting callback, where it's like this thing you've never played, and then you're finally able to play it for real in real life. Like, I thought that was nice, kind of like a nice little callback within the episode itself. And you know what though? They did look like they were playing Mortal Kombat 2. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think they were playing Mortal Kombat.
No. Like, it actually looked like they were playing Mortal Kombat 2. Because like in TV shows about where characters are playing video games, it's always like clickety clack. I don't know what I'm doing. Like,
well, I mean, they were, and she was like, what are the buttons? I've been there. Like, I remember being like that in an arcade.
But like, even then, when they looked like they didn't know what they were doing, it was believable. And like, that is something that for someone like myself, for someone like you who plays video games fairly regularly, like, it's something that I always notice. It's like when a character's at a computer and they're typing, and it's like these really exaggerated hand motions. Like, nobody uses a computer like that.
I just hacked into the Pentagon.
Yeah, it's like you just fucking typed real fast and didn't type anything. Like, I appreciate those little touches, because it adds to not just the realism of the show, but it feels like the creators of the show are being conscientious of these things.
Yeah, I mean, they want you to feel like this could have really happened, or this could have been what, like, the thing. Like, these aren't just people going from point A to point B. They're living these experiences. And these are experiences that we know a lot of our viewers are familiar with in some way or another. Like being in a mall, going to an arcade. I would really like the scene where they go to the costume Halloween shop, and like they have the mask on, and they're both wearing masks, but you can like almost sense Ellie's sadness. Like, it's hard to explain, but like, it was her body language and the way she takes it off, and she kisses Riley. And I think that moment actually makes the fact that Riley dies quite tragic, because she gets Riley to say, I'm going to leave and like join the Fireflies and bomb shit and do all kinds of things that are probably a 17-year-old shouldn't be doing. And Riley's like, no, I'll stay for you. And like, in that moment, Ellie gets everything she could have possibly wanted. And then she immediately loses it.
But that's this show in a nutshell, right? Like, this show juxtaposes those like moments of love with like moments of just like loss. And they did it with Henry and Sam, right? Oh, we got away and we're all safe. Just kidding. Like, and
got him.
Got him. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing like with Tess,
Bill
right?
And Frank.
Or Bill and Frank, or Tess, or like most of the characters in this show, they have this moment of kind of triumph, and then it's like, just kidding, I got bit, or just kidding, I have an MS or whatever the hell Bill and Frank were dealing with. Like, those moments are juxtaposed almost like next to each other, like right on top of one another. And I appreciate it. The show is not pulling any punches. I mean, again, it's not like we've never seen this before. It's just done rather well here.
Yeah, I think it's nothing in this episode is like, whoa, I've never seen the concept of young love, or, I mean, I guess they're lesbians, which is slightly different, but like not really. And it's been hinted
not
at
anymore.
Yeah. And it was hinted at, or remember in like episode 2 or something, someone asked Ellie if she had a boyfriend, and she's like, she gives like a look where that it's like not even an option.
Ellie don't need no man to define her.
Exactly. So, yeah. But it's, I guess though, even you could say The Last of Us, the individual pieces, nothing is totally original. And I don't mean that like disparagingly, but it takes a lot of existing like storytelling infrastructure and like puts it together in a way that I think most people haven't experienced it, being like such a human-centered story in a quote-unquote zombie apocalypse. And it's also about like these people who aren't completely morally righteous as well, that we're following but supporting.
In 2 weeks, Ted Lasso season 3 comes out, right? And it is very similar to this show in a lot of ways. It's honest about it is. It's honest about its human emotions in a way that a sports show normally isn't. Just the way this show is pretty honest about human emotions in a way a show like The Walking Dead hasn't been since like the second season. Like to focus on the characters and their emotional well-being and their emotional states of being and saying that's the driving factor, not the action, not the bloaters, not whatever else is happening in the world at the time. To say that the characters and their interactions and emotions is what's going to drive the narrative is, again, that's a newer thing. I mean, again, not everybody for the longest time was focused on actual character growth when they were writing a story. They were worried about big action set pieces and whether or not people are going to be entertained by shit being blown up and zombies being shot. And there have been shockingly little zombies or the zombie equivalents in this show killed on screen. This is like the fourth one, maybe. And this is the first time we've seen like some real extended close combat action outside of when Joel killed that clicker in episode 2.
Yeah.
And this is episode 7.
Well, no, we got the bloater. That scene,
but that wasn't close. That wasn't like hand-to-hand combat, which is a lot of the game, mind you, is hand-to-hand combat and hitting clickers with pipes and bricks and bottles and other shit and stabbing them. And like this kind of echoes that, but it's interesting because this show and Ted Lasso and some other kind of more well-written shows are focusing on the characters and what is driving them within the world. And then the scenarios that they're in, it's interesting to see those characters in those scenarios because you understand the fully formed nature of the characters. And just, I never got that with The Walking Dead. This is almost the antithesis of what The Walking Dead was and is and has done since the second or third season.
I mean, I don't want to think about The Walking Dead. I don't even want to talk about The Walking Dead.
That's because that show gave up writing interesting characters. This show has 3 seasons in it. It's not going to go more than that. Not with these characters, and it shouldn't go more than that. I don't.
If they go beyond the games, we'll see.
Right, but like if they go beyond the games, great. But that's like if we all agree that A Last of Us 3 isn't coming out in the next 4 years, which I can't equivocally say any more than you can.
Yeah.
Then the show might have 4 or 5 seasons, sure. But right now, it's more or less going to be 3 seasons unless they go past the game. And if they do, great. But I'm still confident that the people who are writing the show understand that it's a character-driven show because it has been this whole season. There has been not enough action to keep people who are expecting a zombie-adjacent show where zombies are being killed every episode. There's not enough for them to stick around, I would think, but there's enough if you're into a well-written character drama with a post-apocalyptic trappings. It's a character piece, and like I think that's would be surprising to some people who have played the game, which is an action game, because there's plenty of it. Like there's so much of just killing and shooting and strangling and shivving and crafting and everything else. And there's like none of it in this. And I'm thankful for that because honestly, a video game adaptation that worries about whether or not it'll be able to show the action on the big screen often overlooks writing believable characters. And this did the inverse and it totally works.
What do you think about, like, I know there wasn't much of it, but there was some like key Joel stuff in the episode. Like, did you like it? Dislike it? Just wasn't that memorable?
I think obviously more or less, and you would have to correct me on this because I haven't played the DLC. Is the DLC used to juxtapose the relationship with Ellie and Joel getting stronger to the point of like catalyzing? Because that's what this episode more or less does, is it shows the side of this that we didn't like. We saw the Joel side of it last episode, and now we see the Ellie side of it this episode. The DLC is used in a different way, correct? Because the function here makes sense narratively why it comes at this point in the story.
It's similar in the sense of Ellie like does some things that saves Joel's life. It's much more action oriented, where like she's literally foraging for supplies to save Joel, and she kills like a ton of people, like a ton of like bandits. So it's much more action focused. Didn't really make. Obviously, that's for the game, right?
It's like a protection mission. Like,
okay. But you have the flashbacks and you have like the flash forwards. But the core function is she is there in a time when Joel cannot. Like she does save Joel's life. Without her, Joel dies in the game and in the show. And in the show, like Joel's obviously trying to like tell Ellie to leave him because he thinks that's the only way he can protect him, right? He pushes her away. And, you know, when she comes back because she's found some things to sew up his wound, he's crying. I wasn't sure. I think he was crying because like he thought he was going to lose Ellie. I've heard other interpretations, like maybe he was crying because he felt like her last memory of him is going to be or pushing away or whatever. But I don't know. What was your take on that?
I thought he was crying because he knew where this is heading. Like he knows that he knows
has another daughter. Like he's ready to hurt again, like that.
And that he may have to make a decision in the future that is not going to be an easy one. Like we know he doesn't know what the stakes are for making the vaccine. We know he doesn't know that yet because I don't think he would continue doing this if he knew, because of the decision he ends up making. But I think it's him realizing that, like, yeah, he's at the point now where he is going to be really hurt should anything happen to her. And it's like, it's that moment of him realizing like it's all over now. Like anything that happens from here on out, like he's making decisions to protect her.
Even above himself.
Right. And I think to read it the other way is a perfectly valid way of reading it. I think, look, a lot can be said with no dialogue at all. And I think it's a testament to Pedro Pascal as an actor that you can glean 2 or 3 close, but not necessarily the same interpretations from him just on the ground crying while she sews up his stomach.
Yeah. So like I said, I know it's a relatively, probably less than 5 minutes or so, 6 minutes of the episode, but in the context of what it sets up, like she saves his life, their bond gets deeper. Like it is going to be important and carry through, I think, in the final 2 episodes of the season. So I appreciate them for not completely ignoring that.
And I wonder if we're going to return to Riley and Ellie. I don't think so. I don't think there's a point. I think, some people might be interested to see how that plays out, but I don't think you need to see it. The DLC, does this show as much as the DLC shows, or does it show more?
I think it's similar where like you don't exactly see how Riley, like they spend I think they both think it's their final moments together, but I don't really think you see Riley's transition. And yeah, it's like, okay, yes, do you want to explain everything to the audience? Maybe, but I think it also like, do we really need to see that from Ellie's perspective? Like, just know that she had a little bit more time with the person that she loved. And like, unfortunately, and also fortunately, in the context of she's a survivor and is immune, she lost that person. I don't really think, do we need to see like their last day together or whatever, last 6 hours? Probably not.
But that's very atypical for this kind of narrative, to cut it short before you see the conclusion to that part of it. Most of the time it's, you have to shoot him. That's not your husband, brother, son, whatever anymore. Like that, we didn't get any of that. And again, I think it's just smart storytelling on the part of, once again, Neil Druckmann, who has a wrangle on not only writing for video games, clearly, but also writing for television. I will be shocked if he doesn't write another television show or do something after this.
He's
but like not associated with the video games he's worked on, like its own thing entirely. Like I believe he could do that without a source material of his own to adapt, is what I'm getting at.
I'm sure he has probably like other scripts and ideas that he's wanted to pitch his games that he might just go straight to like the screen, or someone will hire him to adapt something they want.
But at the same time, like he also like he has look, every video game he's worked on has been massively successleeverything he's worked on in the last 10 years, from what Uncharted to Last of Us.
He was on all the Uncharted games.
He was on at least 3 and 4. No, maybe all of them.
4 is like considered the best one too.
He wrote 1, 2, 4. He didn't write 3. That's okay. 3 is like the not I think 3 is the worst of all of them. Or 3 is better than the first one, but the second one is my jam for sure. The way the second game opens is just masterful.
The train.
The train in the mountains is just I've never played a video game that hooked me as quickly as that game did. And like after how kind of the first game was, that second game was just like, yeah, I remember liking that game a lot. I've gone back and played it a couple times and it still holds up. Especially, I mean, everything. There's Yetis, there's Shambhala, there's a chase on a rooftop with a helicopter, there's a chase on a train with a helicopter. There's so much stuff in that game.
We don't get Nazi zombies in the Uncharted movie now that I'm remembering it. The Nazi zombies were a wild twist.
Oh, from the first game? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey, man, I didn't even see that Uncharted movie. Like, it
was good, but it's like it has a few set pieces from the game, but it's not like the premise is obviously, Hunter, blah, blah, blah. But the actual story is not particularly similar, obviously, because Drake is just so much younger. And
well, isn't it like a story told in the Uncharted universe? Is what Neil Druckmann said. It's not an adaptation of the games one-to-one.
No, there's like set pieces that are from the games, but yeah, overall, it's like, hey, this could have been another Uncharted thing that Drake did, and
look, I mean, the thing that I will say when we talk about adaptations of things, I don't think adapting video games into movies is the way to go. I don't even think adapting most things into movies is the way to go. I think adapting them into television is the way to go, especially when it's a narrative that's fairly complex, that has some beats to it that you need to let breathe. Because I can imagine this as a movie or two movies, and it could have been okay, I guess. It would have felt like it would have been rushed and overcrowded, and certain narrative beats would have been sacrificed.
We're probably not getting a whole Bill and Frank 30 minutes off to the side.
No, and we're probably not getting the Left Behind DLC done in its entirety.
You're probably getting just like the last part or something,
or like flashbacks to it, or something that's a little less nuanced than the show can do. And again, the show is showing us almost the whole thing, but it's doing it in a way where even then, if you've seen it before, it feels new and exciting. And again, you're not just sitting and going, oh, I'm waiting for Riley and Ellie to get bit. Like, there's enough that you as an audience member, I think, are given in this episode where it's entertaining, even if you, again, know where this is going. And even if you don't know where this is going, you know where this is going at this point in the show. I liked it. I think it was a good episode. I don't know. I don't know what the rest. I've heard that the last two episodes of the show kind of slow down a lot.
What?
Yeah, some of the reviews I read were the last two episodes kind of dragged a little bit with people who had seen the entire show. Yeah, up ahead and ahead of time. Yeah, so
that's interesting. Just based on I know the overarching story points, and I was like, they're both seem a bit more actiony from my recollection. So I'm interested to see what it looks like. And they have said the end of the first season is coinciding with the end of the first game, so it's not like there's going to be a cliffhanger or something like that.
Right. Well, there might be a cliffhanger, but I think we'll know. I don't know. They have to do something to leave the audience wanting to with something to chew on.
Yeah, but I meant cliffhangers in we didn't finish the narrative that the first game. I don't know. Maybe
I don't know. I mean, they might
maybe they lied to us, and season 2 is just the last 2 hours of the game. We'll see.
That would be insanity. I don't think they would do that though. I think crazier things have happened.
Attack on Titan, the final season has 3 separate parts. So,
that's fair. Look, I think that the show is in an interesting position now because I would think, and you might agree, that we're clearly in the scope of this being Ellie's show now. Like, Joel has taken a little bit of a back seat. He may be taking a back seat in the next episode as well. And I'm super excited to see what that means for the show, and also for how it sets up the final episode of the show. So
yeah.
Because now we're here. We're at the end of the show. Effectively, we're 2 episodes from the end.
Yeah, no, I'm interested to see where it goes. I think this episode was really good. Probably not quote unquote necessary, but I liked it, and I think the show's better for it.
Yeah, I will say that of the episodes we've seen so far, this might be the one where you can kind of take it out. I'm not saying it's bad, and I don't think you are either. But
that's the nature of the story. It wasn't core to the narrative, in the game either.
Right. It was DLC for a reason. It was just more to contextualize the character of Ellie. And again, it's smart to put it in here because, hey, you've got 9 episodes to fill. This should be one of them. It's going to be interesting visually. It's going to be a showcase for the actors involved. But yeah, I mean, it's not necessary to the narrative overall, but hey, an hour-long diversion with these 2 characters is fine. I will go back to what I said before. It maybe doesn't hit as hard because we've already seen a better love story with a better conclusion that didn't feel as rote as this one kind of did earlier in the season. So that might be the unintended consequence of the Bill and Frank episode, is it kind of diminishes the emotional impact that this episode might have had otherwise. And again, like we were commenting on that episode, like, isn't it surprising that these 2 characters have a happy ending in a post-apocalyptic show? And like, yeah, it is surprising. And then we come to this episode and it's like, and here is how it always ends. And it's like, I don't know if I needed to see this because like I get that this is what happened, but there was no other way to do it other than to give it a full episode to breathe. And I'm glad that I am glad that they gave it a full episode and they didn't try to because the other way to do this is like pepper the flashbacks in throughout the season and you have the flashbacks playing concurrently with the narrative. And then when you get towards the end of the season, Westworld style, you have that reveal of this is how Ellie got bit. But like, I think that this, this is the path of least resistance if you're going to tell the narrative the way they've been telling it, which is more or less, narratively, chronologically straightforward.
It's something this show has shown that it can do well, and that the more time we give these characters, I think it's the better for it. And I think it was a nice little respite, and I'm really interested to see where the last 2 episodes take us. Like, as someone who I think I know what's going to happen, I'm still really interested to see like how this is going to translate.
Same. So on that note, on the next episode of this, you'll be hearing us talking about the 8th and penultimate episode of the first season of The Last of Us. That episode is titled When We Are in Need. Until then, you can find Yashar and I over at weirdingwaymedia.com, which is a repository and suppository for all audio things that you should be sticking in your ear, not in your butt. As for this show, yeah.
Whoa.
You can't listen through your asshole, but maybe you can. I don't know. Maybe you have. Yashar has ears on his butt. Maybe. I don't know. As for this show, you can find us on all streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, and the like. Rate and review the show. Helps us out and it helps the clickers find us quicker. Until then, big thanks from Yashar and I for you listening to the show. And we'll catch you on the next episode.